1960, the USA. The first in the history of television debates between Kennedy and Nixon. 80% of the viewers preferred Kennedy. Simultaneously, the debates were broadcast on the radio. 80% of the radio listeners preferred Nixon. Naturally, this fact attracted the attention of scientists. Those debates became the starting point in the study of the nonverbal, that is, non-word language. Facial gestures, body language, look, position of the body. Why do they tell us more than words? How to learn to read the interlocutor, and is it true that knowing the body language, you can easily achieve any goal? The body is a proto-language. The body is the language that we got through evolution. The body is the language that is very difficult to deceive. There is such an opportunity. She seemed very friendly, but something in her alerted me. We have much in common, but I feel that I can't rely on him. She has an excellent training background, but I don't think she fits this job. Most of us have had to say something like that about the people who we happen to encounter. We asked ourselves why we had these doubts. The answer is simple. These people's words contradicted their body language. Congruence. This is what they call the consistency between verbal and nonverbal means of communication in science. People, first of all, look at how it is said, and only after that they perceive what is said. Accordingly, all gestures, facial expressions, all different means of communication, all this is what people perceive visually. Now, strictly speaking, our time is a visual epoch, with visual effects leading, and only after that, some audible channels are switched on. That is, what people hear, what they analyze. But first of all, what they see is important for them. So why did 750 million viewers prefer Kennedy in 1960? The tanned, self-confident senator gestured energetically and smiled a lot. Nixon sweated heavily, looked pale and confused. He shrank into his chair and hid his legs under it. Here is the host presenting the candidates. Nixon nods to him hesitantly, whereas Kennedy nods towards the camera. His gaze is calm. The appeals to the people of both politicians are made by competent political technologists. But Nixon's flamboyant speech and uncertain behavior do not agree with each other. Radio listeners didn't notice this and gave their voices to Nixon, but they were in the minority in comparison with the viewers. If there had been no television then, radio broadcasting would have taken priority, and there would have been a high chance that Kennedy wouldn't have become the president, and history would have taken a completely different route. But again, history doesn't tolerate the subjunctive mood. What happened, happened. Scientists have calculated the body language, postures, movements, facial expressions performs on average 55% of communication. The voice, tone, intonation, rhythm, and quality, 38% with only 7% left to words. A person can lie on the verbal level, trying to hide something by effort of will, yet the body will definitely give away the effort he's applying to conceal information. The phenomenon of a lie, or the phenomenon of deliberately concealed information, is not accompanied by one gesture and sign, as some researchers claim. We talk about the totality of human behavior and about the fact that the truth and a lie are states. In a state of danger, a state of stress, and telling a lie is always a stress for a person. There are very clear markers showing that a person is telling the truth or a lie. Lying requires self-control and tension. The tension can be obvious or hidden, but it's easy to notice it by looking at the left side of the body. It is controlled worse than the right one. Why? The left side of the body is controlled by the right hemisphere, which is responsible for emotions and imagination. When we tell a lie, we subconsciously try to close our mouth, eyes, or ears with our hands. If the hand covers the mouth and the thumb is pressed to the cheek, the person restrains the words being said. But if the interlocutor listens to you this way, then, again, subconsciously he catches that you are lying. Another gesture of insincerity is rubbing of the eyelid. At the same time, the look goes to the side. All this, when repeated many times, will virtually scream about deception. When a person tells a story that doesn't correspond to reality, he uses almost no broad gestures, illustrators. Such gestures, as a rule, serve to explain what is being said, but to explain what didn't really happen makes no sense. But the narrator shows a predominance of touching his own body, which in one way or another allows him to adapt to stress. The number of gestures illustrators is decreasing, and the number of gesture adapters is increasing. The higher the level of stress is, the more frequent touching the upper body is. Unexpectedly, a deceiver can even be given away by his own nose. Scientists call the phenomenon the Pinocchio effect. Using the thermography method, researchers have found that when lying, the temperature of the nose area increases. On the thermal image, it is red. Why does this happen? The unpleasant feelings experienced by a person forced to lie stimulate the production of stress hormones. This, in turn, causes an increase in temperature in the area of the nose and the orbital muscle located in the inner corner of the eye. That is why the liar unconsciously tries to touch these parts of the body. Our body perceives lying as a threat. That is, since childhood, we have been taught that it is not good to lie, that a lie is always followed by some punishment. Any threat to our body is always stressful. If there is stress, then there are signs of stress. These are changes in the physiology of the body, which are somehow reflected outside, and accordingly, people, when they communicate with each other, instinctively feel it. Leading world politicians today undergo special training in nonverbal communication, including learning to hide gestures that speak of insincerity. Therefore, their true feelings are not so easy to guess. As for ordinary untrained people, only very few of us are capable to make the body silent. We decided to conduct an experiment. Several participants were asked to tell a story of the trip that inspired them. At the same time, during the story, the subjects will be shown photos. Some of them with unpleasant content, the others, on the contrary, give positive emotions. The task for our subjects is, despite the feelings that will arise in response to the images shown, to calmly continue their positive story. How will the behavior of the participants change, and will it change at all? The first participant, Christina, is carried away by her memories. Telling the story, she gesticulates joyfully, but now she sees an unpleasant photo. The girl continues to speak. However, her gestures and facial expressions show her discouragement. At that moment, the thing happened to Christina had to happen. She had less gestures, illustrators, much less. Immediately, gestures adapters began to appear. Gestures of touching herself. Her face showed a clear and visible emotion of disgust. The bodies of the other participants also betrayed their true emotions. Pauses, rapid breathing, looking aside, tension, gestures. This experiment proves any of us is able to control our words, but we are not able to control the nonverbal reactions of the body. If you can give some kind of false information when speaking, you can explain something with the help of speech. Then at least the body language, the face expression language, that is facial gestures, pantomimicry, will still be a proto-language. That is the original language. Body language appeared even before speech appeared. The most ancient gesture, according to scientists, is the thumb and index finger pointing straight up. Now it is called goat horns or devil horns. The rock painting of this gesture was discovered in Siberia, and apparently it served to protect against evil spirits.
Any gestures, any facial expressions, one way or another, they are only aimed at one thing, the survival of the man.
People speak different languages, but their gestures and facial expressions are in most cases universal. For example, a smile and laughter are peculiar to everyone without exception, even to people blind from birth. When they are cheerful and happy, people anxious and angry frown and knit their brows. And if they don't understand something, they shrug their shoulders. Both hands pressed to the chest is a gesture expressing sincerity in all corners of the globe. However, there are exceptions. They are well known to keen travelers. Often coming to a country without knowing the sign language, a tourist can face troubles. A raised hand with a thumb and index finger connected means everything is fine for Americans, yet Brazilians will perceive this gesture as a sexual insult. The thumb pointing up means give us a lift for most Europeans. Only Greeks see it as an obscene gesture, and it is unlikely that anyone will stop to help the person asking for a ride this way. Russians, when they turn their index finger at the temple, mean stupidity, and in Holland, this gesture means that the phrase they heard sounded witty. Or, for example, in order to agree, most people on the planet just nod their heads. In Saudi Arabia, yes is a rotation of the head from side to side, as we do when we say no. In Lebanon or Iran, to say no, it is enough to throw back the head. To say yes, on the contrary, to put it slightly low. The English psychologist Michael Archill, studying sign language during his round-the-world trip, found that during an hour of conversation, the Japanese resorted to gestures on average only once. The Italians 80 times, and the Mexicans 180 times. Russians, according to the scientists' observations, like the Americans, are relatively reserved and use about 40 gestures per hour. However, the latter smile several times more often, even if the topic under discussion is neutral. It turns out that the more naturally we express emotions with the help of gestures and facial expressions, the stronger our mental health. The most vigorous in using the nonverbal language are the inhabitants of southern countries, whereas people living in the north are very reserved. Why? There is no unequivocal answer to this question. There are only hypotheses.
If we take, say, Yakutia, where people walk in winter clothes and live in winter conditions, then they try to wave your hands there when you have 33 sweatshirts and 4 pairs of boots on. When you are wearing shorts and a t-shirt, then, of course, this is much easier. And you move your body much more organically, much more actively, and you want to show it.
All people on Earth are able to speak the body language in one way or another, yet only about half of us are able to read the mood of others around by gestures and facial expressions, and women are able to do it much better. According to scientists, this can be explained by the maternal instinct. The mother recognizes her child's emotions intuitively and in some ways works proactively.
The woman is more attentive to detail and trifles, and from these mosaic details, she will build some intuitive picture of the world, and she will almost always be right.
Another of the fundamental differences between women and men is the amount of emotions that their faces show. Psychologists have conducted a special study. They have asked men and women to imagine themselves in various situations and behave accordingly. For example, the participants were asked to react to messages like, "You've just won $1 million," or "You've just lost a relative." The researchers found that women, in an effort to express emotions appropriate to the occasion, actively use facial muscles. Men try not to lose face and hide their feelings. However, there are situations when both men and women are equally inclined to talk without words. For example, when they are in love. Facial expressions, gestures, body language will give away the feeling of sympathy no matter how hard a person tries to hide it. The first thing is the state that we call association. What does association mean? The person, first of all, tries to look into the face of another person as often as possible. And imagine that the person is, for example, a man, okay? He likes the girl who is sitting, for example, on his left. Then he is talking, for example, with his partner, looking him straight in the eye. But he will look at the object of his interest much more often. That is the very coordinate of the psychological space, which is called the ego vector. Along the ego vector, the person, the object of desired possession, is there. Then the movement towards this object begins, as we said, the movement forward along the sagittal. Sagittal is a coordinate of the psychological space, which says that you want to possess this object. There is a reduction in the distance between these people. Open palms. The person in love subconsciously wants to inspire confidence in the object of his feelings. The same is demonstrated by an open, piercing look, a macho postural pose, hands put in the pockets of pants, legs wide apart. The man subconsciously wants to show that he is confident in himself and he is strong. Shaking flecks of dust off the lapel of the jacket is another gesture of sexual interest, as well as the fact that the man begins to adjust his tie. But a woman, if she wants to attract the attention of a man, begins to adjust her hair, play with curls, touch the face, neck, and show her wrist. One of the most necessary things in life is to know what people around us think of us. This is equally important both in business relations and in friendship and love. There is another amazing sign when it is safe to say that two people get along well with each other. It is called mirror reflection. Interlocutors unconsciously repeat each other's movements, as if they say, "Look, I'm just like you." The more you respect a person, the more you are inclined to reflect his sign language. At the heart of this phenomenon lies the feeling of empathy or sympathy. In the mid-1990s, neurobiologists researching the brain discovered the so-called mirror neurons. They are activated, among other things, when we look at someone who is interesting to us. It is believed that these cells help us unconsciously by facial expressions and gestures to read other people's emotions. There is a concept of rapport, that is, synchronization, with the person who you communicate with, have a dialogue with. And thanks to this, there is adjustment, synchronization of physiological processes, of organisms of these two people who communicate. And since we are of the same kind, mutual understanding is much easier. So how do you make another person like you for sure? There is one psychological trick. During contact, try to imitate the interlocutor, to imperceptibly repeat his movements, as they say, to mirror. As a result, the interlocutor will feel support and trust, even if you don't say a word about your attitude. This method is often used by psychologists to make their client feel relaxed, or specialists of HR departments when they want to entice a super professional to their company. However, HR specialists can behave in a different way too. In the middle of the last century, employers began to apply the so-called stress interview method. Holding interviews with candidates, they create a stressful and tense situation on purpose. There are different techniques. You can make a person sit uncomfortably so that he is lower, respectively, than the person conducting the interview. That is, straight away he finds himself in the position of humiliation. And to create the most uncomfortable environment, that is, it can be hot, well, stuffy in the room. And the questions asked here, as a rule, well, are directly opposite. And they demand everything, all the time feeling rushed, quickly. The goal is to knock the person off balance in order to test him for stress resistance. The subject is often questioned by several people asking provocative questions at a rapid pace without the possibility to think the answers through. As a rule, the outcome of the interview depends on the first 5 minutes. By and large, a stress interview is a provocation, and here all the interest is, in fact, to see how a person will react to this provocation, how he will behave, which of the strategies to overcome the stress he will choose. Actually, this is usually of great interest to the employer. More than 10 years ago, an experiment was conducted. The recruiter suddenly splashed a glass of water in the face of people who thought they were being interviewed for top managerial positions. The reactions were varied. Someone wiped himself off and continued the conversation. Someone was shocked and left. Others struck back. This method, as seen from the experiment, removes the mask from the person and shows his real feelings, which allows you to more accurately judge whether he is suitable for a certain position or not. For example, a CEO needs aggression to some extent, while the manager who works with clients, it is more important to have tolerance. If a person reacts aggressively to stress and applies to a position where he'll have to work with clients, well, this is not the best choice. Here, you need a person who will not react aggressively to some stupid questions from clients, etc., because his sudden outburst of anger can cause big losses to the company. Because no one knows who the client will be, who will knock this manager off balance. We aren't going to use such gestures, but let's see how candidates respond to the stress interview, and what gestures hinder and what, on the contrary, facilitate getting the job. So, the first candidate. The woman smiles, but her lips are clamped. Her hands are closed. This is how excitement is shown, which is not surprising at the beginning of an important conversation. But after the next question, the look goes away and the woman bites her lips. So there is a problem. Here is a woman touching her ear. Most likely, she doesn't know the answer. One more question, and the applicant looks away at the door. At the same time, she lowers her head and raises her shoulders. She does not pass the interview. When a person comes to the interview and makes these barrier gestures, for example, handbags, well, I don't know, telephones, briefcases, find their place where he is calm. We understand the person is worried. This is not an active person. Of course, the gesticulation of an anxious person, as a rule, will be accompanied by these barrier gestures. And besides this, there will be the so-called turtle position shown, namely, what we call sagging of the spine. To defend yourself and hide is this position. This is exactly the position for people who we call anxious hypochondriac. But recruiters interrupt the applicant with a provocative question. The man uses a gesture, hands folded like a spire, when the tips of the fingers touch each other. This indicates that the question didn't catch him off guard and he still feels self-confident. And then the man crosses his legs with his hands around his knees, the gesture of a firm position that cannot be disputed. This candidate has shown his confidence and stress resistance and has won the test. Gestures don't only tell us about professional competence, but also about the social status of a person. Representatives of face control in private expensive clubs and restaurants have long been looking not at the visitor's clothes, but at his gestures. Any manifestation of the bustle suggests that this is a person whose status is not high.
The person who is somewhere middle up is less inclined to express his emotions. Moreover, it is considered even not appropriate in some places. He's still more reserved, laconic. This is such, a sign of strength, success, status. In the end, some kind of a high degree of socialization.
Crossed arms are a signal of handling the situation. Standing astride shows a firmness of spirit. The posture with the hands resting on the hips demonstrates superiority. If the person is sitting in the armchair comfortably, it is a signal of him being completely relaxed. The fingertips of two hands fold to form a pyramid with the palms. This gesture demonstrates competence and power. A person rubs his chin before making a decision. He calculates the options. Movements, gestures, facial expressions can be so expressive that not a single spoken word is required. This is the power of the pantomime art. Actors recreate using the body language, human stories, and characters. A successful mime has more than 10,000 gestures at his disposal. There is not a single life situation that cannot be told without the help of words. Gestures are being modernized. Now we have this gesture, don't we? And this gesture appeared. This gesture appeared. This gesture appeared. I'll take a picture. For example, a selfie, huh? We couldn't even think, imagine this before, that we could take a picture of ourselves. However, it appeared. I take an imaginary friend of mine. We take pictures and look at the screen. That is, 10 years ago, we didn't have this. Well, it was not here, right? Psychologists have studied the techniques of talking and deaf-mute mimes. Both of them communicate with the viewer only with the help of nonverbal means of communication. However, there is a difference in the presentation. Hearing-impaired actors are more expressive in their gestures. After all, for them, this is the only way to contact the world around them. For them, this genre, pantomime and mimic genre in general, is a real find, because they actually feel like fish in the water in it. Yes, unlike us who can talk. That is, it is very difficult for people who can speak to come to a gesture, right? A definite one. That is, to force themselves to do it. Why can't I say, well, this or that gesture? While for them, it's easy. We don't realize and can't control most of our gestures, but it is they who give out the true intentions, thoughts, and feelings. Therefore, for many people in public professions, learning the basics of nonverbal behavior is an absolute necessity. Without this, it is impossible to achieve career promotion. However, in ordinary life, the ability to read the interlocutor is no less important. If we learn this nonverbal reading, then we'll discover new opportunities for ourselves. We'll understand whether we are being lied to or not, whether people feel sympathy to us, who does the threat come from, and who is our friend. To learn how to interpret body language means to get a tool for successful interaction with the world around you.